Oops, I forgot to do my fade out. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's a bonus broadcast. It's the 4th of July. I don't know if I should wish you guys a happy one or not. I kind of am, I'm like a mixed bag myself today on this. I was supposed to be off today, but I decided that it was a good day to come on and just like talk after everything that happened yesterday. And there were some questions on the Patreon feed, which I'm going to answer, but feels kind of like a good day to kind of like recenter. And, you know, I take some advice from one of our audience members and alums who's actually currently the mayor of her town in upstate New York. And one of the things she said was, you know, a lot of us need a day to mourn. And I think that's totally okay. I will tell you all, I think everybody kind of knows that I was awake. I mentioned this because I was posting at 2:35 in the morning. I was awake this morning really early because I could not stop thinking about just the terms of the bill and what it's going to mean for people and the implications in so many arenas of our lives. And so it just felt really important to be here. Anyway, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. Many of you know I'm an ex-Wall Street lawyer, now a leadership consultant, an impact consultant, and I've been doing this broadcast for 8.5 years for those of you who are new. Let's just talk for a second. Oh yeah, and I'm wearing a white V-neck t-shirt today, and I'm in front of my bookshelf in my standing yellow utility cart, and I'm coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land, where today I tore into the Republicans in the town parade. So that's a story for another time. Actually, maybe I should just tell it, because it's relevant actually to what we're going to talk about today. So this is the first time that I've been here back on the East Coast for the 4th of July since my kids were like really itty bitties. And here where I live, which is like right outside of New York City, I did not know this actually until today. There's this huge 4th of July parade that is a very big deal here. And so a good friend of mine here and comrade, someone who, you know, I'm another single mom, someone I'm very deeply aligned with politically, just moved into a new apartment on the parade route and was like, you should come by and see our apartment and then we'll go watch the parade. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, why not? So we're out there. Our apartment's great. We're out there watching the parade. And, you know, this, where I live right now was intentionally chosen because it is incredibly welcoming and diverse. Many of you know my child was really badly bullied in Southern California, and it was really important when we came here that we landed somewhere where we knew queer kids were safe. And so I have not had a run-in with literally anybody in the year that I've lived here who is on the other side of the fence. Like the vast majority of the people who live here are like ex-Brooklyn, ex-Manhattan, or, you know, lifers in the greater New York City area. And everybody that I've met face to face is incredibly progressive, like very left leaning. LaMonica McIver is our rep. You know, we have consistently in my district voted blue for a very, my district includes Newark, New Jersey. And, you know, we voted blue for a very, very, very long time. So one of the things that happened at this parade was that I was like very afraid of what might come down the pike. I had a moment where I was like, I wonder if this is going to be a moment where there's going to be some shit. And I was concerned, not like afraid, but like concerned that there might be like an event. Okay. And so lo and behold, we're sitting there along the parade route and along come the town Republicans. And there's only like 20 of them. You know, it's not like this is a massive number of people, but they're on a float and they've got Trump flags. And they've got this woman singing along to an audio track. And the song was, "Why Can't We Be Friends?" And I lost my mind, you guys. Like, I can't even tell you how angry I got in like a split second. Now, fortunately, I was there with my really good friend who also was similarly enraged. And there were people all around us who like got up from their seats and turned their backs on these people as they came down the street. I turned my back and then they started shouting and I flipped them the double bird. And meanwhile, my friend was shouting like, give us back our healthcare. You people are fascists. You're putting people in concentration camps. And then I, of course, like in my enraging state was like shouting at these people, are you joking? You think we can be friends with you when you're putting people in concentration camps? What's wrong with you? Lost my mind. There was a guy dressed like Trump with a Trump flag who looked at us and was laughing at us while all of this was going on. There were other people there who were laughing at us. And then one guy got really, really mad that I had flipped them the double bird. And, that was a personal insult to him, even when concentration camps aren't. And I was so angry that I was like physically shaking when the float moved down the street. Like physically, like literally had the kind of adrenaline shakes. My heart was like pounding. I turned to my friend and I was like, I'm not calm. Like, I'm not okay. That was not okay. And then we had one other small contingent of the parade that was like the right to lifers, where people, again, lost it. We're screaming like, abortion is a human right. And, the whole audience lost it, just lost it. No forced birth, all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, all the other participants in the parade, this was really crazy. The people who came after the Republican float were the local Mexican dancers who were joyous and amazing and beautiful, right? Doing like traditional Mexican dances. And we had a whole bunch of different kind of like ethnic groups that came through then, marching bands that were representing, a Black Youth Society and a variety of other groups that, came through that kind of represented the diversity of the area. Then we had the Queer Big Apple marching band, which was freaking amazing. Oh my gosh. And that was the moment where I finally started to calm down. And then there were like Jewish Voices for Peace marching against the bombing of Gaza. And there were, the National Action Network, Reverend Sharpton's organization was represented there. And there were people, with like resist and Trump must be defeated and all these other things. And, I felt much better by the time we got to the end of it. But I will tell you that as I was leaving this whole event, it just struck me that there is an incredible need right now to make our voices heard, that none of this is acceptable. Right. And I know my emotions were really close to the surface. This is not the way I normally like to operate in public spaces. I definitely had a moment where I was like, this is going to end up on the internet after it was over. But I will tell you that I think that there is a point to, in an environment like that, where MAGA is out there saying like, why can't we be why can't we all just get along? Right. When like they're literally voting for like trans people to lose all their rights, for ICE to be, a secret police force that rounds up anybody for any reason and sends them to a third party country or disappears them, never to be heard from again. The idea of like, why can't we be friends I lost my mind. I just like absolutely lost my mind. And I think that there is a sense of needing right now to let people know where we stand, right? And I've been really big on this, as those of you who are white folks know this for a long time, about how white people just have to stop putting up with other white people who are MAGA. But this is a moment, truly, they're fascists marching in the 4th of July parade against like everything that like we are allegedly supposed to stand for, but never really have. And there's just no reason, honestly, any longer, not that there ever was, but to try to, for the sake of like, I don't know, whatever it is, like white people are really good at this around Thanksgiving dinner table or not, but this thing of like maintaining the peace, like I'm done with peace on this stuff right now, not nonviolent protests, please don't mistake me, but like, I'm not going to let those people march down the street of my town in front of my queer kid and not scream at them. Like, I'm not going to do that. So all of this from the standpoint of where we sit right now, I guess, informs some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, because, there is, first of all, I want to clear up a couple of misunderstandings about kind of like where we stand right now. So we talked yesterday about the fact that the New York Times put out the various things that were going to kick into effect at various times. And the fact that the bill is staged in particular ways to at least make it look like the tax breaks are coming first, child tax credit is coming first, and then the really bad stuff cycles in after that. Some of it's going to hit in 2025, like work requirements for SNAP, but they've set it up so that like most of it doesn't kind of tip over into 2026. And so people were, and some of it not until like 2027. People were like, oh, like, how can we inform people about this? Well, I got to tell you guys something, okay? I was doing some research last night about the way in which hospitals map out their funding. And, for everybody who doesn't kind of understand this, many rural hospitals inside the United States only exist because of Medicaid. And one of the things that they have to do is they have to map out their projected revenue. I mentioned this very briefly yesterday, but they have to map out their projected revenue and how they're going to pay people and hire people and staff people and buy supplies and all this other kind of stuff, buy medicine, based on what they think is coming in, as with any business, over the next 12 to 24 months. And so overnight, we have already had an announcement, I believe it's in Oklahoma, but don't quote me on that, of one rural hospital that is closing because of this bill, instantly, because they know that they're not going to have the money to stay open. Even if it doesn't kick in for the next 6 months, they know they're not going to have the money that they need, okay? I saw another person on our Patreon feed this morning, and I haven't verified this myself, that something like 49 out of 51 rural hospitals in Oklahoma are going to close eventually. That's the prediction from all of this. So one of the things I want people to realize is that even though some of this stuff officially doesn't kick in until next year, the effects of it are going to be felt immediately, especially in very poor communities where the vast majority of people are on Medicaid. They're going to lose their local hospital. They're going to lose their local mental health clinic. They're going to lose their local substance abuse rehab facility. They're going to lose immediate care that they need, and way before the official law kicks in. So again, I want to just remind everybody that it's not like the con is going to be easy to hide. People are going to feel this very quickly, and not just in the context of the good stuff that they're trying to front load, but some of the really bad stuff is going to start to have an impact pretty much on day one. So one of the things that we have to think about here is well, what do we do with all of this? And I talked a lot this week as we were getting ready for the vote on this bill about the importance of getting involved locally where you live. And all of that kind of stands, right? Mutual aid is incredibly critical right now. Dual power is incredibly critical right now. That's why we're running the dual power accelerator again. I think there's a link already below it in the show notes, but I'll make sure I always point to the wrong corner, that it's linked up here when I'm done, for those of you who might want to get in and learn how you can build alternative systems of power where you live so people survive and stay safe. Okay. But one of the things that is really critical right now, in addition to that, is that we really have to start doing the work of thinking about how we're going to deal with the fallout from this when people start to wake up. And, this is something I freely admitted inside the Ripple Effect Institute, inside our dual power accelerator calls, that I am not the person who is very good at this, right? I'm not a person who is cut out to talk to the reformed Republican walking in the door saying oh, I'm so sorry, I want to help out, right? My tendency tends more toward the, at least internally, not strategically, to the, fuck around, find out, end of things. Okay. And that doesn't mean that's the right attitude. I've said to all of you before, we need to have compassion, but I do have this kind of visceral thing in my body and my brain that is right? So what I do want to recommend is that for those of you who are good at that work, and, again, I will remind you that Loretta Ross, many of you know who she is, very famous civil rights organizer. She is interviewed in Anand Giridharadas' book, The Persuaders, and she talks about the fact that there are people who are cut out for that work and some people who aren't. She talks about it specifically in the context of Black folks doing anti-racism work with white people, that there are folks who are not cut out for that work either, right? And that's okay. And then there are some folks like herself who are actually have the bandwidth to carry it, okay? If you're somebody who has the bandwidth to carry that space, if you can approach it from a regulated standpoint, it's a good moment to really brush up on your sort of deep canvassing, let me create cognitive dissonance skills that we talked about in advance of the 2024 election, because there's going to be a need to welcome those folks in a way that makes space for them and doesn't shame them and doesn't send them back to the cult. And that's going to happen sooner rather than later because people are waking up. And the other thing I will just say here is that it's very obvious that the Trump MAGA machine is already ramping up the propaganda. We have this crazy situation where one Republican who voted for the bill yesterday, this morning, said, I really hope my governor can stop this, as if he's not responsible, right? We're going to see the propaganda ramp up, and there's going to be deflections. This is the fault of immigrants. This is the fault of other people of color. They will find other ways they're going to bomb another country, maybe, right? There'll be other ways that they will seek to deflect from the impact of all of that. But it's not going to change the fact that the impact on people is going to be very dire. And, I don't see that work actually as easy. I'll just say this. I think it takes very skilled people who are very well regulated to hold people to account, meaning like, we're not going to tolerate your racism. We make no room and no excuses for the fact that you voted this way and you're suffering. Maybe they've woken up a little bit. Maybe they want to know how to help, right? How are we going to make room for that? That's really where it comes down, what it comes down to. And there are people who are really good at that. So if that happens to be you, and we have a bunch of therapists in our programs that we're running on an ongoing basis who know how to have these conversations even when they're hard, don't enjoy having these conversations, but can do it really effectively. Your skill set, if you happen to fall into that realm, is going to be very needed. Okay. So the other thing that I just want to mention here that feels important to say is that as we approach all of this from like an emotional standpoint, this is all extremely painful. And I said to you all this week, like, don't shove it all down or shove it all away or pretend like it's not there or insist on keep going. This is going to be really rough. I mean, we're going to have an ICE secret police force essentially that is funded more than any other military on earth, save Russia and China, right? It will be the largest funded law enforcement in the United States, more than like the FBI and like the ATF and a whole bunch of other smaller agencies combined. And they are going to be hiring people who are not trained. They're going to be hiring people without standards. They're going to be hiring people who have no experience doing this. Like, we all know where this is going, right? Like, you can see who they're going to recruit for these kind of roles. And it's going to be really ugly, like really ugly. And so one of the things that I think is really key about where we're going to be with all of this is that we have to stay present to the emotions of what we're living through without allowing ourselves to be frozen, right? This has been like an ongoing theme for like the last 6 months here. We're all going to need time to process what we're experiencing. I had a moment yesterday, and this is not my thing. I'm not like a very big crier these days. I was earlier in my life, but yesterday afternoon after the bill passed, I like stood in my kitchen and I just like cracked, like sobbed for a full 5 minutes in my kitchen over what's to come. And that I felt better after I did that, honestly, like, because being present to the emotional response of it is really important. Right? It's a validation of our humanity. My rage this morning at the Republicans in the town parade is a validation of my humanity. And just in the same way that our outrage and our disgust at seeing our neighbors blackbagged off the street and disappeared is a sign that we care, right? The key to this, though, is doing the hard work, like the really hard emotional work of allowing yourself to feel all of that and process it so that it doesn't like destroy you or freeze you or keep you from taking action. So I want to just encourage everyone, I'm very big right now on the critical importance of mental health care for everybody doing any form of frontline work, whether you're finding that in conversations with friends or with family members, or whether you're doing actual therapeutic work with a professional, whether you're finding, solace in a faith community, or you're just simply in community with really good people who share your worldview where you can get support. Like, it cannot be neglected now, okay? Because the only way that we can kind of keep going through all of this and continue to pushing for something better is if we process the emotions in real time. Okay, one other point I want to make about this, and then I'm just going to answer some other questions that people had today. There is a strange possibility emerging from this moment, which I think we all should be conscious of, which is that if, and it's still an if, a significant number of his base experiences what we know they're all going to experience, and they actually are able to lay the blame where it belongs, things could change in this country very quickly. And I'm with a couple of other commentators who were awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, writing about this on Blue Sky, that we actually may, in an odd way, be closer to the fall of the regime now than we were 2 days ago, because they've chosen to do something so destructive and so self-destructive that the impact of it when it comes to full fruition is going to be unavoidable. I know that people are really good at self-delusion, particularly when they're inside of narcissistic cults, right? And at the same time, when you've been lied to, and they say things like, you're not going to have to pay tax on your Social Security, like that propaganda email that landed in everybody's email inbox this morning, mine included, that's a lie. It's full of lies. It is officially from the Social Security Administration. I spoke this morning to a CPA who said she is very concerned about how she is going to explain to her clients on Social Security that, yes, they still have to pay taxes on their Social Security, that actually that whole thing is false, okay? When people start to wake up to the fact that they have been lied to, that's the moment where cognitive dissonance cracks, okay? When people discover that it's not just like gang members who are being deported, but it's literally like their next door neighbor or their wife or their friend, that's a moment of cognitive dissonance, okay? When they've been told that they're going to be better off on the basis of the big, beautiful bill, and all of a sudden they lose their health care and they don't have any money to feed their families, that's a moment of cognitive dissonance. And so we have to keep in mind that there is a strange, there's just a strange foundational crack happening right now. And we don't know yet how it's going to play out, but there is a possibility greater than there was earlier this week that folks are going to meet circumstances that are going to cause them to be like, hold up a second. What just happened? Because I was told it was this and now it's this. I was told it was over here. Granted, that's my own racism, but now it's hit my family. Or I was told that I was safe and now I'm not, right? So, this is how this is all going to unfold. Anybody who says that they have predictions about this right now has no clue, right? I'm just going to say that. I mean, I've said that before to you all. What I am looking for, like many other left-leaning progressive folks, organizers, activists, commentators, what I'm looking for is the way in which the domino could fall. And there's a big old domino sitting right now in this bill at the top of a run of dominoes. And if it falls in the right way, everything that they stand for is going to collapse. So let's stay focused on doing all the good work that we're all doing. Please stay connected in your local community, because there is going to be violence everywhere and harm everywhere. And we all have an obligation, if we are in need, to seek out support. And if we have support to offer, to give it. That's how mutual aid works. It's like two-way street, to try to help people and to make sure we get the help that we need. But let's also not lose sight of the fact that, I said it yesterday, they're in this kind of like hyper manic state of joy at the destruction without looking at what the actual outcome for them is likely to be. So we got to stay clear on that, like really clear on that. And again, nobody can predict how this is going to go down, but they've set some things in motion now that they can't stop and they don't want to stop. And that may actually end up being their downfall. So we shall see. All right, we'll see. All right. A couple things I wanted to just deal with that were questions on the feed about the bill itself so that people are very clear here. The tax cuts being permanent. So there was a question about like, how can they make tax cuts permanent? Like if we had the House and the Senate and the presidency again, couldn't that be reversed? Of course it could be. What people mean when they're saying the tax cuts are permanent is that the tax cuts that were given to the super rich back in 2017 were set to expire at the end of 2025. And so what the bill does is like wipe clean the expiration date. In that sense, they are making them permanent. But of course, if a new House and a new Senate and a new president is in play, those tax cuts can be rescinded. And in fact, if we have the political willpower, we could simply tax the billionaires so that we have everything that we want and cut the defense budget and abolish ICE, and we'd be in a much better position than we've been for a very long time. Okay. One thing that kind of slid, I don't want to say it slid under the radar, but it didn't get as much press coverage as it should have, is the effect of the bill on higher education. So this was actually the thing that I was awake thinking about when I first jolted awake this morning at 2:30, because I have 2 kids to put through college starting in the not too distant future. And one of the things that the bill does is it caps the lifetime amount that a parent can borrow to put their child through college at 65 grand. Anybody who has had any exposure to higher education in the last few years knows that if you're lucky, that will get you 1 year of college, not even including like living expenses. So one of the things that that is going to mean is that it's going to be much, much more difficult for middle class and working class kids to access higher education. Then on top of it, there have been a whole bunch of revisions to student loans and how those student loans are, we're going to have a whole other dire situation here because they've eliminated some of the most popular programs from the Biden administration that allowed people to pay proportional to their income. Those are gone. So the student loan situation is also now going to get like very dire. And then on top of it, they've gutted the ability of graduate students to borrow for their post-grad education. They have capped that also, I believe, at 100 grand, which, by the way, 31 years ago, when I started law school, would have prohibited me from going to law school if that was the cap. So we're going to see fundamentally like a and then on top of it, they've done this other thing, which is that they've put a huge new tax on universities with significant endowments, which means that places like Harvard and Yale and Princeton and other MIT, other very significant institutions of higher learning will now not have the endowment to fall back on that they need to provide significant financial aid to poorer and working class and middle class students. So essentially what this does is it guts the capacity of working and middle class kids to access higher education. It's really scary shit. Like I had a moment, this is why I was awake, where I was like, how on earth am I going to be able to afford to put my kids through college? And I have 529 accounts set up for them that I started when they were born, and they're still not very big. One of the things that I think we have to think about here is what that does to future generations. And this was the thing what I was really mad about at like 2:30 in the morning, because it's not, none of this is good for anybody at all, right? Like I'm angry about all of it to every level. But what we're talking about here is like generational harm. Like harm that like the US will not come back from for like 30 years, at least, unless these provisions are at some point rolled back in the near future. And that in and of itself is quite terrifying, frankly. And it makes me really angry because no child deserves to have their future stolen or their potential earning capacity decimated or their interest in learning like taken away from them because they won't be able to afford it. So folks should be aware of that. And I don't know what the answer is going to be. I was talking this morning to another friend of mine who has a kid who is going into college this fall, who forced her kids to apply for universities outside of the United States. And even though their kid was accepted into every college that they applied to, including the ones that were outside the US, they decided that they wanted to go inside the US. And I have to say, you all know I lived in France for a while I was a college student, and saw my friends pay for textbooks. And that was it in France for their entire college education. It certainly is going to shake up how folks think about what it means to try to get an education if you can't get that kind of education inside the United States. And then that's going to mean certain things for the future of iteration, technology, tech, not technology, like tech. And I'm thinking about like pharma, research, medicine, all sorts of other things, right? Engineering. What happens if all of those folks who are brilliant and deserving can't get an education inside the United States? So in any event, it's something that people should be aware of and definitely keep front of mind when you're thinking about the way in which this bill is going to play out. Okay. Last question I was asked is from my old friend, Amy. I hope she's here. she was asking about the 2026 election and some of the things that I had said yesterday about the fact that we have to expect all the old hijinks, but that I do think that it is, you all know I don't tilt toward conspiracy theories. And I think the idea that we're not going to have free and fair elections ever again is actually capitulation and voter suppression and not true. Okay. So one thing that I just want to point out here is that we don't actually need to flip a single seat in a red state in order to take back the House. Now, would I like to see us flip a bunch of seats in red states? Of course. But if we can flip the red seats in blue states, we will take back the House by a large number. So that includes like seats in California, seats in New York, seats in various districts that have like kind of swung purple, but we know now from some more recent special elections that there's a likelihood that those seats could go blue. That's a place where there's going to need to be like an enormous amount of focus in 2026. Okay. We're going to have to work very hard, particularly those of us who live in blue states, to try to flip the Republican held seats in our states. Okay. So like, I'm just thinking about McLaughlin in New York, his seat, that seat should flip. That seat should flip. No question about it. So again, and Virginia, yes, another great example. So that we're going to need to put in a lot of work there, first and foremost, okay? But second of all, I'm going to remind everybody, because this is a thing that I think slips people's minds from time to time, that the way elections are administered are at the state level. This is why I mentioned this yesterday. Every state has different rules and regulations and laws about how their elections are administered. So one of the things that is really critical to this entire framework is that you battle against voter suppression efforts in the state where you live, okay? And we're going to see more of them in the next 18 months, no question about it. We're going to see crazy efforts to try to kind of like close, I mentioned this yesterday, but like close polling sites in predominantly Black and brown areas, close polling sites in places where lots of Democrats live, change the rules about like what hours you can vote at. Like we saw them Sunday to the polls. It was eliminated in Georgia. People would go to church and then they would go to the polls. That's gone. Attempts to kind of put certain unruly conditions on what happens while people are waiting in line. Can't bring a chair, can't drink water, can't eat food. We're going to see all that kind of nonsense. And so it's really important for people to stay like very aware and very focused on what's happening in your state legislature, what's happening with your state attorney general and your governor, and to push back against that on a local level the second that you start to see it happen. And you're going to have to be organized where you live so you can like get the word out to everybody that you know as soon as that sort of stuff starts to drop. Like just incredibly critical to stay focused on that, because the more little wins we have there, like say we save a polling place in a predominantly Black, brown, Democratic district, right? Or we defeat a rule that says you're not allowed to bring a chair to sit in when the vast majority of the people in that district are over the age of 65, right? And there's going to be long lines. You defeat that, you're increasing voter turnout. And that's in addition to everything that we have done on, a number of levels for like the last huge number of election cycles in terms of getting out the vote. But we've got to be very specifically careful right now about what's happening where we live. And don't lose hope, because there are strong possibilities, like I said, that if we were simply to flip the red seats in blue states, we would wipe the floor with them in 2026. But it's going to take a lot of work to do it. Okay. I think that's it for today. Because I'm here on a holiday, I'm just going to give you guys the Cash App and the Venmo in case you want to send me a tip. I would take it. It's rolling along the bottom of the screen. If you would care to send me a little bit of extra juice for being here today, I'm going to go hang out with my kids again after this. And I just want everybody to kind of try to stay hopeful, like be very present to the emotions, like I said, but please try to stay hopeful, because we have no idea how the dominoes are going to fall here. And it's going to be very painful. Like I said, it's going to be really awful. Like I was talking to a friend of mine this morning and I was like, everybody is going to see ice round somebody up. It's going to happen in your town. It may happen to somebody that you know. We're all going to bear witness to it. And if it happens to us, God forbid, right? It's time to really get organized for protection and safety. No question about it. And, be present to the emotions of it, but don't stop. Like, don't stop. You can take a break. Like, take care of your mental health, take care of your physical health, take care of yourself emotionally and spiritually. but we can't quit. And that's really kind of like the best, wisest words I've got today, folks. You know, I think it's really critical that we stay incredibly focused right now on a positive outcome. Let me say one other thing, actually, before I go, before everybody logs off, because last few minutes always people are like, bye, before I'm done talking. I'm going to say one other thing. Anybody who has done any work in the realm of things like abolition, right? Or, you know, in the context of the civil rights movement way back when, anybody who did any work related to abortion rights back in the 70s, right? Like early 70s, when Roe versus Wade was about to become the law of the land, knows that there's a really critical thing about doing the work at points of crisis. And that is that you have to hold fast to the vision of the future that you want. When we're in the middle of this kind of chaos, it's very easy to just feel like you're in a hole, right? And to get tunnel vision. It's like, oh my God, everything's so awful. How am I going to survive it? How are the people that I love going to survive it? But if we don't hold the space for that better world, right? If we're not keeping an eye on the target, if we're not actually even doing the work of imagining ourselves in that place, like how good is it going to feel when we're on the other side of this and there is a society where everyone is welcome and loved and where everybody has what they need, right? Where there isn't just like, you know, verbal passage given to the idea of equity, but where it's actually real, right? Where, you know, whatever this nation becomes a place, if it lasts, becomes a place where there truly is a sense of value that all people are created equal. You know, if we move into that place and we sit in that place, even for just like 30 seconds or a minute every day, we're keeping our eyes on the prize, so to speak, in the words of that old civil rights spiritual. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on. It's really important to do that. Okay. Don't neglect that work, because it will also allow you to not just keep the hope of what could be, but keep faith in the possibility that it could happen. Right. So super critical, and to stay in that space at least as much as you can. And I'm sending you all so much love. I'm really grateful that you're here. Thank you to our Patreon subscribers. Thank you to our channel members that allow me to keep doing this work. Thank you to those who are kicking me $4.99 on the super stickers. I see you guys. Thank you very much. And I will catch you guys live on Tuesday. There is a bonus video up on our sister channel, Ripple Effect Institute, today on what you need to stop doing to make a difference. And there's another video going up on Monday that I think you guys are all going to like very much over there as well. All right. I will catch you all soon. All right. Try to get some rest this weekend. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.